What if the smartest person in the room isn't the one making speeches or correcting others, but the one asking questions, listening quietly, nodding along like they have nothing to prove? Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher who saw straight through human vanity, believed that intelligence in its purest form doesn't flaunt itself. It doesn't need to. In fact, when it reveals itself too openly, it invites danger. He once wrote that modesty became a virtue only because it served the fools. In other words, society needed a way to keep the intelligent from rising too far above everyone else, so it pressured them to blend in, to downplay their light, to pretend they were less than what they truly were. And the most brilliant among us, they learned to survive by doing exactly that. This wasn't about humility in the moral sense. Schopenhauer wasn't handing out virtue points. He was describing a survival mechanism. In a world dominated by ego, where most people feel threatened by what they don't understand, being visibly intelligent can trigger more resistance than admiration. So the wise learn to wear a mask, not of deception, but of protection. He laid it out plainly in The Art of Being Right. One of his favorite rhetorical tricks: if your opponent makes a strong point and you can't immediately respond, simply claim their argument is beyond your comprehension. Say you're not equipped to judge. What sounds like concession is actually a weapon. You're subtly suggesting that their argument is nonsensical, or worse, not worth engaging. That's the paradox Schopenhauer exposes again and again. Sometimes the greatest strength is in pretending not to have it, because when you hide your sword, people stop reaching for theirs. He saw this not as weakness, but as a higher form of intelligence, a kind that isn't obsessed with being seen, a kind that measures its moves and lets others misjudge, miscalculate, and walk straight into the trap of their own overconfidence. So before we rush to be heard, before we fight to be seen as the smartest voice in the room, maybe we should ask, who's really in control? Because sometimes the person who looks like they don't understand is the only one who actually does. Here's a question worth asking. If intelligence is so powerful, why does it need to hide? The answer, according to Schopenhauer, and confirmed by centuries of human behavior, is simple. Most people don't want to be around someone smarter than them. They want to feel clever, capable, in control, and if you make them feel otherwise, they won't admire you, they'll resent you. So, the wise don't always correct the mistake. They let it hang in the air, they nod, they smile, they let the room believe what it wants to believe, not because they're cowardly, but because they're calculating. This is where modern psychology catches up with ancient wisdom. The Dunning-Kruger effect shows us that people with low ability tend to overestimate themselves. And the more competent someone becomes, the more they realize how little they actually know, which means the real experts, they rarely need to prove it. They're the ones staying quiet, while the overconfident hold court. But here's the twist, that humility, whether sincere or strategic, creates space. It makes others feel safe. They relax, they open up, they expose more than they realize. And by the time they notice who they're really dealing with, it's already too late. Socrates made a philosophy out of this. He claimed to know nothing, asked basic questions, and let others show their hands. The method was simple. Don't declare what you know. Let others assume they know more and watch as their logic collapses. Sun Tzu called it straight pretend inferiority and encourage their arrogance. It wasn't a moral statement, it was a war tactic. Make them underestimate you. Let them believe the fight is easy, then strike not with more force, but with more foresight. Schopenhauer's version wasn't about swords or battlefield. It was about everyday life, conversations, social dynamics, navigating a world where showing your full hand only gives others more reason to play against you. He believed that the intelligent should never feel compelled to expose their intellect, that sometimes the sharpest move is the one that dulls your appearance, not to deceive maliciously, but to protect your freedom, your clarity, your strategy. Because when others don't see you coming, they don't see how much space you've already taken. And by the time they do, you're not playing their game anymore, you're winning it. So, no, playing dumb isn't about shrinking. It's about choosing when and if to reveal the truth. It's about controlling perception in a world that rewards image more than insight. And it's about knowing that being seen as the smartest person in the room doesn't matter if you're already 3 moves ahead. There's something unsettling about silence. It doesn't defend itself, it doesn't posture, it doesn't ask for your attention, and yet it holds a kind of authority that noise can never match. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. He didn't just understand intelligence, he understood what happens when intelligence walks into a room. People don't usually welcome it. They compete with it. They challenge it. And when they can't win, they find ways to reject it. So the wise, he said, learn to wear the mask. Not to lie, but to live unburdened. They don't walk into every conversation like it's a duel. They don't interrupt. They don't correct. They don't explain what doesn't need to be explained. Because they know that silence, when chosen, is not submission, it's control. And there's a reason this works, because most people equate quietness with weakness. If you're not asserting yourself, if you're not showing off, you must not know much. That's the common assumption. And the quietly intelligent, that they let that assumption linger. Not because they're afraid to be known, but because being underestimated is more useful than being admired. Modern psychology calls this impression management. A person controls how they're perceived, not by flaunting who they are, but by choosing what they allow others to see. Self-deprecation, small admissions of ignorance, even asking questions you already know the answer to, these aren't confessions. They're strategies. They create space. They let others feel bigger, smarter, more dominant. And in that space, people start revealing themselves. They talk more. They boast more. They say the quiet parts out loud. And all the while, the one who asked the innocent question gathers more than they ever gave away. This is what emotional intelligence looks like when it's weaponized, not to manipulate, but to navigate. Because in a world where ego is constantly trying to be the loudest, the person who can stand still and say nothing becomes the most unpredictable presence in the room. You see it in leaders who don't shout to command respect. You see it in negotiators who listen longer than they speak. You see it in the sharpest minds who let the spotlight pass right over them until the moment it matters. And when it does, the shift is seismic, because no one expected the quiet one to be holding the sharpest blade. This is the kind of intelligence Schopenhauer admired, not the kind that needs applause, but the kind that's 3 steps ahead, cloaked in understatement, intelligence that doesn't need to be seen to be in charge. It's why he warned against pride. Not because it was immoral, but because it was dangerous. The moment you need people to know how smart you are, you've already lost your advantage, because true power doesn't need to be recognized. It only needs to be ready. And sometimes silence is the loudest move on the board, on the key. Not every battle is won by being the strongest. Sometimes it's won by being ignored. George Washington knew he couldn't beat the British by force, so he beat them by illusion. He staged fake supply lines, filled empty barrels with sand and labeled them gunpowder, fed misinformation to his own men knowing it would be intercepted. And while the British waited for an attack that would never come, Washington moved in silence. What they thought was incompetence was misdirection. What they believed was weakness was carefully constructed camouflage. The Allies did it again in World War II with Operation Fortitude. They built an entire phantom army, inflatable tanks, dummy radio transmissions, a high-profile general whose very presence was a decoy. Hitler fell for it. He diverted his troops. He waited for an invasion that had already started elsewhere. The deception didn't just work, it changed the course of the war. And that's the heart of Schopenhauer's philosophy, made real on the battlefield. Intelligence that pretends to be stupid, strength that wears the mask of frailty, genius that allows itself to be dismissed, knowing that its true value only needs to be revealed once. This isn't limited to war. It happens everywhere people are underestimated. Socrates walked the streets of Athens claiming he knew nothing. He asked questions so simple his peers assumed he was a fool. But he wasn't gathering information, he was unearthing contradictions. And when the truth came to light, it wasn't the student who looked foolish, it was the teacher. Even Muhammad Ali used this tactic. In the ring against George Foreman, he leaned back on the ropes, took hits, acted tired, looked like he was losing. And when Foreman's strength was gone, Ali struck. It wasn't luck, it was patience, wrapped in the performance of exhaustion. All of them, the philosopher, the general, the fighter, they won by pretending to lose. They played dumb to buy time. They let the world believe the lie because the truth had better timing. This is strategic humility in its most distilled form. It's not about denying what you are. It's about deciding when the world gets to see it. Schopenhauer knew this kind of power. He knew that the greatest intelligence doesn't wear a crown. It wears a grin and shrugs its shoulders. It doesn't correct. It doesn't boast. It lets others miscalculate until their false confidence becomes their downfall. Because if the world is quick to reward arrogance and quick to punish brilliance, the truly brilliant will find another path. One where the crown isn't given, it's taken quietly, unexpectedly, permanently. And by the time anyone realizes what happened, the game has already changed. Some truths are too sharp to be delivered directly. That's why, throughout history, the most powerful insights often came from the mouths of those who were never taken seriously. In Shakespeare's plays, the fool is never just comic relief. He's the one character allowed to speak freely to kings. He tells the truth no one else dares to say, but he does it in riddles, jokes, and irony. He wears the mask of madness, not because he's lost, but because he knows the price of being honest without it. That's not just a literary device, it's a survival strategy. The fool lives because the king thinks he's harmless. But what the king doesn't see is that the fool is the only one in the room who's free. Schopenhauer would have recognized this immediately. To him, the world wasn't governed by reason, it was governed by appearances, ego, and fear. And anyone who challenged those illusions directly would be cast out, or worse, crushed. So instead of walking in with fire, the intelligent learn to move like smoke, subtle, unthreatening, invisible, until it's too late to stop. That same principle lives in the parables we were told as children, long before we had words for strategy or self-preservation. In The Emperor's New Clothes, it isn't the advisors or noblemen who see through the illusion, it's a child. Why? Because the adults are too afraid of looking stupid, too afraid of losing status. They'd rather pretend they see the brilliance in something fake than admit they see nothing at all. And yet the only real intelligence in the room came from the one person too young to need validation. That's the kind of clarity Schopenhauer admired, truth that doesn't care how it's received. You see it again in the Taoist tale of the useless tree. A gnarled, misshapen tree is left standing while all the straight, perfect ones are cut down and used for lumber. Why? Because the tree had no obvious utility. It survived because it didn't draw attention. Its ugliness became its armor. That tree didn't pretend to be strong. It didn't need to. It thrived precisely because others dismissed it. This is the essence of Schopenhauer's strategy. Don't fight to be seen. Don't chase recognition. Let others overlook you. Let them think they're smarter, faster, more capable. Let them underestimate you. Because the moment someone sees you as a fool, they stop guarding themselves. They speak more freely. They show their weaknesses. And when the time comes to act, they're completely unprepared. That's not just wisdom, it's freedom. To be smart enough to know when to look stupid, to be powerful enough to never have to prove it, to move through the world with your full capacity hidden just beneath the surface, untouched by the eyes that aren't ready to see it. That's not cowardice, that's the highest form of control, and those who master it don't just survive the world, they outlive the noise, outmaneuver the arrogance, and outthink everyone who thought they were winning. We live in a world where performance is currency. Say the right things, wear the right clothes, project the right confidence. It's a game built on appearances, and in that game, those who are truly intelligent often find themselves at a disadvantage. Not because they aren't capable, but because they refuse to play the part. Schopenhauer never wrote for applause. He wasn't interested in being liked. He told the truth as he saw it, that most people mistake intelligence for threat, and the greatest power often lies in pretending you don't have it. He saw what happens when brilliance shows itself too soon. It gets mocked, challenged, envied, or attacked. So instead he chose a quieter path, one where intelligence doesn't need to declare itself, it simply waits. Because when you wait, something remarkable happens. The world forgets to defend itself, it lowers its guard, and then, in one small moment, one move, one word, one action, you reveal the thing they never saw coming. That is not passivity, that is precision. And this isn't just philosophy, this is life. In a conversation where someone's wrong but loud, you can let them speak, let them believe they're winning, let them think you're too slow to keep up. And when the time comes, your quiet correction lands with the force of finality, not because it was shouted, but because it was earned. Or in a workplace where you know more than you let on, you watch, observe, absorb. You become the one who sees the patterns, the one who doesn't compete for credit, but ends up with influence that no one can quite explain. That's the hidden crown. It's not given, it's not fought for. It's taken quietly, patiently, deliberately, by those who understand that the loudest room is often the most blind. And when the time is right, and the illusion collapses and the noise fades, only one person is left standing with the full picture in hand, the one they never expected, the one they never feared. The one who knew all along that being seen as foolish is just another way to stay free, that playing dumb, when done by the truly wise, isn't weakness, it's the highest form of strategy. So the next time you feel the urge to correct someone, to assert your intelligence, to prove your worth, pause. Ask yourself what Schopenhauer already knew. Does this moment serve you? Or would it serve you more to smile, nod, and let them think what they want? Because you're not here to be seen. You're here to win. And sometimes the most dangerous mind in the room is the one everyone forgot was there.